Welcome to Upon Further Review, where we go further than expected and with a new point of view. I'm Franco Harris, and no, I'm not an actor or a professional speaker, and podcasts are not my profession. But many of us are still struggling to understand how Joe Paterno and Graham Spaniard got fired, and Tim Curley, Gary Schultz, and Graham got charged with crimes that never occurred. The firing of Joe Paterno by John Surma and a easily led Penn State Board of Trustees caught us all by surprise. And little did we know that Joe was incredibly ill during this time and would pass away just 2 months later. Now we understand why Joe couldn't fight for himself. And now we know why Joe couldn't speak up for himself. As we watched during this time, the weaker Joe became, the more vicious Surma and the Penn State Board of Trustees got in their attacks on Joe. As Joe lay defenseless on his dying bed, unable to fight back, John Surma and the Penn State Board of Trustees kept attacking him. It's still impossible for all of us, myself, to believe that no one, not one member of the Penn State Board of Trustees, stood up and fought and defended Joe. Not one of them. Not one of them questioned or challenged John Surma on the firing of Joe Paterno. When Joe needed it most, when Joe needed someone most, no one was there for him. This is still difficult for a lot of us to understand. Joe was never charged with any role in the Sam Dusty case. He cooperated fully with the investigation. With regard to state law and university policy, Joe followed the law and university policy to the letter. But this should come as no surprise. That was Joe. That was Joe's way. Joe was a stickler about the rules. In a newspaper article in 2017, Tom Corbett stated that he didn't think that Joe Paterno should have been fired. He knew that Joe followed the law and university policy, but he did nothing to stop the firing back then. Even the head of Pennsylvania State Police said that Joe Paterno met his legal requirements. So, if they knew, what did John Surma know? And what pushed him to make the decision that he did? But we saw that following state law and university policy could not protect Joe from the desires of certain people in power and the Penn State Board that sat on their hands while this was happening. The justice system failed Joe. The Penn State Board of Trustees failed Joe. That one really hurt. But now looking back, we realize that there are just like-minded people on that board. No one with different opinions, no one who will rock the boat. All like-minded people. And they have these different groups that are part of the Penn State Board of Trustees, and they still follow their own self-minded, self-like agenda, which is very disappointing.
Guys, within the last 5 minutes, Joe Paterno stood outside of his living room window and thanked everyone for their support. Behind me are Penn State students. Paternoville has migrated from Beaver Stadium to outside Joe Paterno's home on McKee Street in State College, about 2 minutes away from Beaver Stadium. There's probably about 150 to 200, growing to about 500 total people here. The atmosphere is unlike anything I have ever seen. They clearly love Joe Paterno, and their love here shows. They just sang the alma mater. I'm not sure how long they plan on being here, but it doesn't look like this party is ending anytime soon. Live outside Joe Paterno's home in State College, I'm Matt Maisel, 6 Sports.
Well, there were some people who stood up for Joe Paterno that night. People who recognized the wrong being done and who were ready to fight for Joe, to stand up for Joe. I'm talking about the students of Penn State University. They filled the streets that night in support of Joe Paterno, and I would like to personally thank those students of 2011 and 2012 who instinctively recognized injustice and spoke out against it. Thank you, students. When someone gave so much, meant so much, and made a difference in so many lives, how do we not stand up and fight for them? That was Joe Paterno. As we saw, the students did, while the Penn State Board of Trustees sat on their hands. Those of us who got to share some of those years with Joe know the important role he played in our lives. He changed our lives in so many positive ways. Yes, we all moved on, but Joe's success with honor and the grand experiment were built to last and remains a part of each one of us to this day. Not only did he make a difference in football players' lives, I came to find out he made a difference in the lives of people who never actually played for him or met him. Joe Paterno's reputation for integrity and fair play preceded him wherever he went. I've been touched to receive letters from people sharing their JoePa stories with me, and especially these past few years. When you think about the Jerry Sandusky shower incident at Penn State, there is so much to focus on. Ironically, Sandusky was found not guilty on that shower incident charge that ignited the outrage and media storm in the first place at Penn State. How about that? Not guilty on the most egregious charge that there was. Not guilty on the charge that got Joe Paterno and then Graham Spaniard fired and put Tim Curley and Gary Schultz in jail. But John Sermon thought nothing about it. Our justice system was abused, and some of them are still living this lie. How could this happen? There is also a lot to go over about the organizational failure of the Penn State Board of Trustees. What about the Big Ten Conference and even the NCAA and Mark Emmert? We saw failure after failure after failure with these organizations. They even made the crisis worse. And what about the media frenzy? The rush to judgment on Joe Paterno and Penn State was swift and brutal. And then you had the court of public opinion, talk radio, TV sports commentators, newspapers, magazines, all of them piled on Joe Paterno. And anyone who tried to defend Joe, wow, it got brutal. And then there is the Free Report. More hype than substance or facts. We have big problems with this report. Remember through all of this, this is a quote, "We are what we believe we are." Never lose sight of that. Remember this. On October 29th, 2011, the Penn State football team beat Illinois at Beaver Stadium. This victory, 409, made Joe Paterno the winningest Division I college football coach in history. 409 victories, the most ever in Division I college football. What an accomplishment. History was made that day, and there was so much to celebrate, so much to be happy about. The team was having a great football season, ranked in the top 25, but even better, this Penn State football team was ranked the #1 academic football team in the BCS top 25. Wow, #1 academic football team. Nothing could have made Joe happier. The education and graduation rate of his players was always Joe's top priority. These are moments that we always want to think about. And that's why we are Penn State. but going back to finding the truth. Once again, I want people to know there was no crime that occurred that night at Penn State, and Joe Paterno followed the law and policies. So where do we start looking to find the truth about why John Surma and the Penn State Board of Trustees fired Joe Paterno? There are so many facets to this story and so many subplots that it's difficult to give you the facts as we now know them in any straightforward manner. I hope you'll stay with me as we try to unravel them.